Okay. And we are now live.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, good afternoon, colleagues. This is Delegate Mary Lehman, Chair of the Government, Labor, and Elections Local Government Subcommittee, meeting officially for the first time. We had a brief organizational meeting earlier this week. And we will be discussing two bills today. No voting, just conversations about two bills that we heard in the last week. There is interest in both of these, but more information, I think, would be helpful, I hope, to all of the subcommittee members. And so we are going to start with House Bill 99, and that is municipalities annex land, land use, and density. And that is the primary sponsor is Delegate Schindler, along with Delegate Fair, who actually also is on this subcommittee, but he is not with us just yet. And so Delegate Schindler, in talking to you about this bill, I unfortunately I missed the hearing myself, but I think this bill has been around for a couple of years. I think you told me you brought it last year.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, and that at that time it went to the Environment and Transportation Committee, where local government was then based. So if you could tell us a little bit more about the thinking behind the bill. I know it is statewide, although it probably arises from your experience with Hagerstown. But tell us what you're trying to do with the bill. It seems pretty straightforward. It's only 2 pages, but if you could help us with that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. So what this bill does, Madam Chair, is would essentially take right now, just a little color on this. Right now, what happens if a municipality wants to annex land, and the zoning of that land that's going to be annexed is significantly different than what the new proposed use would be. That county, whatever county it is, has the ability to grant or not grant what they call express approval. If the county does not grant express approval for that annexed land, the land is still annexed. However, they have a 5-year moratorium on any type of development of that land. Right now, the only requirement is that zoning piece. It looks at the zoning in the county and what the zoning would be when it would be annexed in the city. And if it's significantly different, that's when this, express approval rule comes into play. However, there's nothing else required. So there's no explanation needed. If the comprehensive plan for the county would call for such a development, however, the zoning may be, something, and grandfathered zoning might be something, different. The county can simply say no, and there's no explanation needed to be given. And then that 5 years happens. And what I've seen from personal experience is when developers come in and want to build more housing, or redevelop an area that may be a brownfield, if that express approval isn't given, by the time they take the time for development and then also that 5-year moratorium, we lose a lot of development. And so I'm merely trying to find a way to base that more on fact or more on comprehensive plans than on just purely zoning. As we need more housing and we need, redevelopment of brownfields, that's really what we're looking to do.
Okay, thank you. Well, that is helpful. What, first of all, well, let me clarify. So you're not trying to get rid of the 5-year rule. You're trying to tie it to a different standard. In this case, instead of the current zoning classification in the county, you have, and this is repeated, the same phrase twice on page 2 of the bill, that it would be recommendations in either the comprehensive plan of the county or the municipality. So you're not trying to get rid of the 5-year rule. You're just trying to change sort of the standard of what it's tied to. Is that accurate?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And then I will tell you, because I asked around of some, county folks, and I did have a brief conversation with Mako, mainly because, obviously, that they're opposed to the bill as written, but just trying to figure out, was there any room for compromise? But also because, as I said, I missed your hearing. I was out, at presenting my own bill in another committee, and didn't hear the testimony. And so I wondered about, your response to any concern that this is just an effort at an end run, not by you personally, but by municipalities around not just county zoning, but an issue that I understand came up in the hearing, which was about, which is one of the big concerns for counties, which is school capacity, public school capacity.
Well, my argument to that would be that people are going to live where they're going to live regardless. And the school capacity piece of it, if it's in their comprehensive plan to create more housing, I think that perfectly pairs up with the school planning as well.
Okay. I want to open it up to questions by other members of the committee. Whether you were there for the hearing or not, have additional questions or want clarification on anything. Delegate Fisher, Delegate Crutchfield. Yes, Delegate Crutchfield, go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Delegate Schindler, I noticed, okay, so the bill is really trying to alternate or give some type of different authority to the municipality, right? To kind of make this an express way for them to annex, or can you just, I'm trying to understand it just a little bit more. And can you also give maybe examples of what you're referring to or when it's happened? Maybe that'll be helpful too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, again, right now, the county has the ability to either grant or deny that express approval, which would put essentially a 5-year moratorium on any kind of development. I don't want to get rid of that, but I'd like to see the counties have a good reasoning if they're going to deny that, as opposed to just kind of a cart,
A blanket.
carte punch.
Okay.
No, right?
Okay.
Because there are times when it's probably appropriate to say no. If it's growth that's no prepared for utilities or schools or what have you. What I've seen at firsthand for my examples are always certainly from Hagerstown area.
Okay.
I sat on the local city council in Hagerstown, and we have, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the prime outlets.
Yes, only because I'm from Montgomery County and have driven through there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we have a prime outlets that are unfortunately not what they used to be. They're starting to kind of, they're probably half full at this moment in time. And we've had multiple developers come to us through the years that would like to purchase the prime outlets and be annexed into the city. And they would like to turn that into more of a town center. So right now it's zoned all commercial, the prime outlets property. It's sitting half vacant. What they like to do is to leave it half commercial and build housing, make it like a nice town center type of area. We've had 2 different developers come in and propose that as just an example for you. And the express approval has been denied. Now, when the developers see, okay, well, it's going to take us at least 5 to 10 years to build this out, and then we have to wait another 5 years for this express approval, they abandon ship. We also have some other housing developments in the city right now that have been annexed and the express approval was denied. So those lots just sit empty right now while we wait for that 5-year clock to run up. And it's unfortunate that the county's not doing anything to develop. There's no movement on additional schools or additional utilities or capacity. It was just a carte blanche no. So it's really stifling, especially when it comes to housing, as we're trying to get our housing stock up and home prices down. We're trying to figure out ways that we can help with that. And this just seems like an unnecessary barrier.
Okay. And so, Madam Chair, may I have one more question?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Please go ahead.
And so Delegate Schindler, what is your suggested, changes or ways in which this can be done? I mean, are there specific ideas that you have around this, or?
Absolutely. So at least as the bill was written, the intent was, instead of it being kind of an arbitrary yes or no, as long as the zoning is different, they can say yes or no, and then that's the end of the conversation. I'd like to see it tied towards, every county and every municipality has to come up with a comprehensive plan. They have a 10-year plan that's built out. That's part of the state implemented that, where they all have to be submitted 10-year growth plan of what type of development is going to be there and what that growth of housing and everything like that. I'd love to see it be tied to something more data driven, so that if the proposal fits in with that comprehensive plan, there shouldn't be a need for that express approval, and to potentially lose a lot of development in Maryland, especially where we are. They just end up going to West Virginia or Pennsylvania because it's about a 10-minute drive either way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Fisher, any questions? No, you're all good. All your heart and mind is clear on this bill. So I have another thought that I'm just kind of tossing out there. Somebody I talked to with way more experience than me, well-known in Prince George's County, politics, for his extensive land use and zoning experience. When I talked to him a little bit about the bill, and he took a glance at it, and I said, just off the top of my head, kind of like, I wonder about your new condition of tying it to land use recommendations in the comprehensive plan of the county or municipality. I said, what about the idea of getting rid of the term municipality and just saying, tying it to the county plan? And he said that would be a possibility, because he said, my response, just seeing that the municipal plan is part of that, is that's really not even appropriate, because the land you're talking about is not in the municipality. Even though you want it to be, it's in the county, and it's the county's zoning that's what's relevant and what matters, and what the county is trying to plan around, usually 10 years at a time for, future growth, anticipating growth in population and changes in, development patterns. And then, of course, the needs that you have that stem from that, specifically, infrastructure in general, but schools are what most people think about, is, school capacity. So what would be your thinking about that?
I think that's
I
think that's completely appropriate, because of course the municipalities are part of the county. So that growth plan is going to include the municipalities as well. I think that's completely appropriate.
So that's something you could potentially live with, to limit it to say land use recommendations in the comprehensive plan of the county only, not
absolutely
the municipality. Okay, well, I'm making a note to myself, possibly. The other thing that that this Prince George's County source pointed out, that sometimes the language around comprehensive plan, it can also be referred to as the zoning plan. And I asked, are those the same thing? Or they just called different things in different places? And he said, sometimes they're two different things. So I don't know if more wordsmithing would need to be done around that, or what your thoughts might be on that.
Okay. I'd have to go back and look and see exactly. I'm not sure, to be honest with you on that. I've always heard it referred to as like a 10-year comprehensive plan, but
and that's what I always thought of it as.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and not just finding out, I don't mean to give you a lot of homework to do, but some things you could maybe consider and circle back with Mako on, or go through our legislative library to figure out, are those terms ever interchangeable, or do some counties use one versus the other, comprehensive plan versus, zoning, or they give it some other name. And you're right. In my experience as a former member of the Prince George's County Council, we had a 10-year plan that we referred to. The one other thing that was raised to me is that, and I don't know, that I guess this is worth mentioning, but how we would get at this is comprehensive plans are like guides or blueprints, but they are not binding. They're not legally binding. They're not the law, unlike zoning maps. Do you have any thought about that?
Sure, I do. And so what I would think of is future development in any area. The point of the express approval process is to make sure that there's smart growth, and that we're not expanding faster than we have capacity for, right? Whether it's schools or utilities, what have you. So to me, even though it's not legally binding, the zoning is misleading, because zoning can change.
Mm-hmm.
Things are zoned and not touched until there's a reason for them to be changed.
Right.
Whereas your 10-year plan is sort of where you want your county to be in those 10 years, what type of growth you want to see, what kind of development that you're trying to attract, what have you. To me, it makes a lot more sense to base those decisions off of something like that than, potentially something that's just been zoned and sat at a certain zoning for a long time.
Okay. And then I'd just like to return to one more thing again, because I was not at the hearing. How do you feel like, you were able to respond to the questions or concerns specifically about schools and school capacity with respect to how zoning could be changed and maybe, more residential housing added in theory, in a place where had not been anticipated. Let's use your example of the prime outlets. I don't know, what the nearby schools are or what their current capacity is, but how did you, how do you respond to those kinds of concerns? I understand that came up in the committee hearing.
Sure. And I don't know that they quite articulated that in the hearing, but I would just say that if the comprehensive plan, 10-year plan of the county is to see additional housing growth, by whatever percentage. And, we're adding that type of, housing that they're looking for in their plan. I don't see it as being, contrary to what the county is hoping to do.
Okay. Fair enough. Any other questions? Any other feedback? Delegate Fisher, no, you're all good. Okay. Delegate Crutchfield, anything else from you? Ideas, suggestions?
No, I'm
Okay.
good. Thank you though.
Yes, and thank you. You asked very good questions as well. Okay, so Delegate Schindler, if you want to do like a little more homework and have a few more conversations, including with your sidekick, Mr. Fair, who is on this bill with you, and get back with us, we can be, in touch talking about it and figuring out what's next.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so we are going to, with that, move on to Delegate Terraza's bill. Thank you for joining us, Delegate Terraza. She is spending a little time with us to sort of think through some things in House Bill 394, which she recently presented in GLE. And this is a bill, I think pretty much everyone supports, the goal of the bill, which is to get kids safely to school, kids who walk to school, who are within that, mile or mile and a quarter radius, whatever it is for elementary, middle, or high school kids to get there safely there's a definition of what a safe route is, and it's sidewalks, it's other footpaths. It could be a sidewalk along a street. There's a couple of different definitions. But the concern is there's a pretty hefty fiscal note for counties. There's no state fiscal impact because it requires county boards of ed to annually, look at walk routes to schools and then make a report to the county, which would then have to act on, where there were deficiencies with safe routes, whether it's a sidewalk that doesn't exist or one that stops and starts. And as the bill is written, it would require the county then to pretty much immediately address those and cover those capital costs of sidewalks. So, Delegate Terraza, are you with us still?
I'm here.
Oh, you are. I didn't see you up at the top.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm here.
So if you could talk to us a little bit more about the bill, what your thinking is, and the concerns around costs. If there's any way to break this out, chunk it out in some way, what do you?
Yeah, so I think we all want our kids to get to school safely.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, and you probably know this too, as a former local elected, oftentimes we hear about it after the fact, not after the fact. First of all, there, as I said, lots of fatalities every year from kids trying to get to school, and lots of injuries. I think there was 800 a year of fatalities, 150,000 injuries. And so the problem is that, the school system is making choices about who's a walker and who's a rider in part based on finances. And that makes sense because they've got limited budgets and they need to figure out who are busers and who are walkers. But the problem is there's not necessarily in the calculation, certainly not in every county, how those kids would safely walk to school, just sort of the distance that they have to walk. And so this is a cross file of a Senate bill. And I know that that senator's had injuries and real problems in the district that he represents. Now, I personally think, and I think I've mentioned this to some of you, but that what we need to do is when we're starting a development, really give that some thought. But I have a bill to do that that's in a different committee. This is about retrofitting, and the problem is retrofitting is expensive. And so I don't know if we can sort of, I'm certainly willing to talk to Mako or whoever else and sort of talk about, if it could be phased in, if it could be, any particular option. I think that's sort of the best option. I think there probably will be a resistance to writing a report and then not acting on it.
Yeah.
So, but maybe having a plan over time or there certainly needs to be a safe route. I understand fiscal notes are fiscal notes, but we can't have kids walking to school in an unsafe way. And I think the problem is from a social justice, equity issue, some families have a better ability to drive their kids to school. They have the flexibility at work, et cetera. And some folks don't. And I think that's like I said, a real equity issue. So I don't know if that helps. I'm happy to try to work with Mako to get that down. I do think part of the answer is doing my other bill, which maybe you can urge your colleagues in ECM to pass, which is to get the developers to do them in the first place and have that part of the discussion in the beginning.
Yeah, no, I do like that front end approach on new development, but as you said, that bill is in another committee. So I have a couple of thoughts, as I read back through the bill and then read the fiscal note to get a better handle on where those costs would be. For one thing, and I think this bill has been around a few years. I don't frankly remember it from years past, but there are two big expenses up front for first for county boards of ed and then for county government. And that is that annual report. So, and the annual report is required to be done by the school board on those safe, like alternative routes to school. And then the report would be turned over to the county, and then whatever is identified, right, the county has to like immediately begin to make these, changes, these capital improvements to create, paths, alternative safe walking paths where they don't exist, or to piece together what does, if it stops and starts, and patch that, together and make it work. So what if, just for example, instead of an annual report, what if after the initial report, it's like every 5 years rather than every single year? That was one thought. And then certainly if you were going to phase it or prioritize, what if it began with that for every new school that comes online, that has to be done immediately? And I don't think I'm saying the same thing as your other bill that you talked about when there's new development, but it's driven by
Right. Yes, I understand.
a new school instead of new housing.
Yes. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm certainly happy to give some thought to how to do that. But I think it makes sense that if you're creating a new school and deciding where the walkers and the bus riders are, to look at that at that time. I certainly think that makes a lot of sense.
And that does happen that way. And new schools come online every single year in a lot of counties, especially
Yes, they do.
bigger counties, but even smaller ones. The one other question I have about related to the fiscal note is that, back to your point about phasing, when you read all the way through the fiscal note, so there's this whopping figure of $96.5 million in FY 27, which is pretty staggering, but that is for all counties. And that is for both those studies on the front end and whatever, consultants, some counties in the fiscal notes that they would have to hire outside consultants and that would cost a lot. And they didn't, of course, the fiscal note writer didn't survey every county, but the bigger counties, not just the biggest though. Anne Arundel was mentioned, I think Carroll maybe, and of course Montgomery and Prince George's. But that $96.5 million is for all of the counties for those studies each year or that first year, but then also that capital cost of the sidewalk construction. Now, interestingly, that figure falls all the way down by 2031 to less than $1 million a year. And that again is across the system. I was kind of astonished that it fell off that steeply from 96.5 million to 950,000. So do you have any thoughts about, about that? Does that surprise you? It falls off
It doesn't surprise me because if we're requiring them to do the work up front, then eventually there's not going to be as much work to do. So I'm not really surprised by that.
Okay.
I think this should have been part of the discussion all along, and so we wouldn't be this far behind in it. But I like your suggestions and certainly open to hearing whatever the other committee members' questions, et cetera, are. But I'm willing to do whatever it is takes to get the fiscal note down.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm happy to work
Other
on that.
questions from who do we have with us? Mr. Schindler is still here. Thank you. Delegate Crutchfield, Delegate Fisher. You have been so quiet. Uncharacteristically, you must have some opinion on this.
Honestly, well, first of all, you're super thorough. I want to thank you for that. And I mean that sincerely, my old committee, we started out under one chairman with subcommittees, and they were very, very thorough subcommittees and meaningful. And then we ended up not doing subcommittees, like literally didn't have them for years. So this is, yeah. And yeah, I'm totally listening. Yeah, Calvert is a leader in land preservation, and it's always has been. And so we have 4 high schools, and it's very difficult, obviously, for people to walk along. We have one highway. We have one main road that bisects the county in and out. So for Calvert, this would be really kind of hard to implement. And I get the idea, right? Because I walk to school. I was kidding with my aide here, I would walk to school, to and from school is like 1.5 miles, Back in the day when you walk with no shoes on and, you walk
barefoot uphill.
Yeah, exactly,
yeah.
Uphill both ways. Thank you, Luke. But in Calvert, clearly you need transportation to get to the schools, and that is a reality. So I don't know how we would, and we're not building any like new additional schools, certainly always renovating and improving the existing schools. So I'm not really sure how we would implement this. And so, that's really my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. That means something. I have a quick question for you. Are you saying there are very few, if any, walkers even to like a neighborhood elementary schools, or is your county so sort of rural / suburban that it's most kids get to school by either bus or by their parents driving them?
Nah, fair question. So in Chesapeake Beach, we have the elementary school, and the elementary school there is a beautiful brand new elementary school in place of where the old one was located. And Chesapeake Beach is a town. It's an incorporated town. And yes, there are children that do walk there, but there are sidewalks. Right. But there are an equal number of children who just live too far from there because there's also a state highway that goes right by there. And we have truthfully had a lot of issues in front of that school where people go really fast. So I think it's been solved, it meaning the transportation part been solved by the bus system by doing that. But there are clearly sidewalks. Certainly not everywhere, but it's a municipality. I'm not sure how we impose on the municipality, additional sidewalks. Although I love the sidewalk idea, obviously, for municipalities, it makes sense. Okay. That's the only one that we really have where there's, it's kind of walkable, truly walkable and safe. or
Okay.
safe-ish.
Okay, well, that's a good perspective to have. Before I go, Delegate Terrazza, it looks like you have your hand up. Delegate Schindler or Delegate Crutchfield? Any thoughts or questions for Delegate Terrazza?
Sure, I did have a thought.
Sure.
So in our area, it's very much my son walks anything within 2 miles. They have to walk to school in Hagerstown, so it's pretty significant.
At
We
the
do have-
elementary level, they walk 2 miles?
they're closer together, so they don't have that far of a range. But the high school students certainly 2 miles.
2 miles. Wow. Okay.
But we do have mostly sidewalks, and I think for like our municipality, even if there are stretches where there aren't, it seems like the flexibility in the plan, Delegate Terrazza, and correct me if I'm wrong, allows the school district to kind of draw the safe walking path. So I feel like at least in our area, they could bypass the few spots that don't have sidewalks by merely drawing the safe path that does have sidewalks to get to the school. And I do feel like that gives the school district a little flexibility in choosing, where they need to make improvements on sidewalk.
Delegate Terrazza, do you have any response or any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I need to take a closer look again at the bill and see. I mean, it seems like for Delegate Fisher's district, I mean, what we really need to look at is where there's walkers, not necessarily. So it seems to me like the cost in some place like where Delegate Fisher represents would be low because you should only, and I have to look at exactly how it's framed, but you should only be needing to look at where kids are walking. So that should cut the cost down significantly. And but Delegate Schindler, and Madam Chair, if I'm permitted to ask a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I really just want to let's figure out how to work this out. So are the kids in your district, they're walking up to 2 miles, and I'm sorry if you already answered this, but are there safe places for them to walk, or is it?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, there may be a couple of spots where there aren't, but I'd say for the most part, mine's all in a municipality. So there's essentially sidewalk everywhere.
Okay.
So for our area, the only expense would really be drawing those safe walking plans up, right? Like where there's crosswalks to cross the streets and things like that. But I don't really think there'd be sidewalk expense, especially, I guess my question was, does your bill give them the flexibility to say, okay, well, this cross street might not have a sidewalk, but this other one does. So the safe walk plan says, instead of going down this block, go down the block before where there is a sidewalk. Yeah.
It should, yes. I mean, it shouldn't be that. My intent was not that in every direction they could find a safe route to school, but that there was a safe route to school. And if your zone is 2 miles, there should be one that doesn't require them to walk 10 miles out of the way, obviously.
Right.
But that is certainly my intent. I mean, my intent is to the extent that there are dangerous. I mean, it seems to me that when you're cutting a walking zone, and I don't mean this as any criticism of any particular board, but when they're deciding where the walk zones are, they should have a sense of how kids might get there safely anyway. So I'm not sure I understand, and I can have a conversation with some folks, but why the expense is so high for them to evaluate this, because it seems like they should already be evaluating how the kids are getting there safely when they set the bus routes. But this is certainly creating that conversation. And so I'm willing to do whatever I need to make sure the conversation is happening and we're getting some of those safer routes.
I agree that they should have a better sense of safer routes because school systems have to evaluate, as you said, who gets bus transportation and who can walk, at least in theory, safely. But everyone agrees with your goal. I think that's safe to say, but there needs to be a more, scientific, for lack of a better word, I think, approach to what is a safe way of getting there. The one thing that's, I think, interesting about this bill, and if it's been around for a few years, I think this is the first year you've taken it on, is this concept of safe alternative routes that include, and I tried to characterize this at the beginning, but I didn't have the bill in front of me, and now I do, a road with sidewalks and at intersections, crosswalks. That's one safe alternative route. Another one is a footpath, and a third is a bike path. So, it's not clear to me how they do the assessment of, like, is the traditional quote unquote, safe route a sidewalk that's, that's obviously protected from, a roadway, not too close to a travel lane, that kind of thing. Presumably a sidewalk that's in good condition, not all like broken up and problematic. But then if that doesn't exist, an alternative could be what they're calling a footpath or even a bike path. That's a little bit confusing to me. I mean,
So
that's-
it's interesting because that one didn't confuse me, in part because in Howard County, a lot of times the safe route to school is a walking path through, I mean, interesting enough, but like through the woods, and there's some
Right.
conversation about how safe that is, but um, I don't think it needs to be along the road. And I know in Howard County, the anticipation is not that every kid will walk along the road. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but
Yeah, I think you are. Yeah. And you
I
can't
think it
make
depends
kids
on the
walk along
county.
the route the school suggests, right? I mean,
Right. No,
kids are like adults. They'll find shortcuts, right? They'll,
exactly.
yeah, I get that. Any other questions for Delegate Terrazza, Delegate Crutchfield? You want to weigh in on this at all? Or do you have any thoughts about the relevance to Montgomery?
No, nothing just to add. Thank you, though. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. So Delegate Terrazza, I'm trying to look at what other notes I made. I also did talk briefly, I think I told you to Michael Sanderson, about this. And, he agreed, obviously, like all of us do, that we want safe routes to school. The concern is, twofold. First of all, the fiscal note, but then secondly, where it's the county, the bill reads as if it's the county government's responsibility to construct these sidewalks, even if those would be done. And there is some language in the bill around this, but even if, more often than not, and that's anecdotal, we don't know, but that it could be sidewalks along either state roads or municipal roads, and yet it's the county being instructed to figure this out. Do you have any response to that or thought or?
No, it's an interesting point though.
Yeah,
But I mean, I don't know if we could build in something about the state being part of that conversation, but if we're
Yeah.
relying on a state road, from my perspective, the conversation still needs to happen.
yeah,
But I mean, it's a fair point that I'll work with
yeah.
Mr. Sanderson for sure on
Yeah.
that.
And I think going back to the annual reports, how they are, if they're going to be every single year, yes, it would be more expensive in the beginning, but is it necessary every year? Maybe every 5 years is not enough. Maybe it's every other year.
That's a
Maybe
good suggestion.
every single year, and also possibly zeroing in on those brand new schools, as you said with your other bill. Trying to get it right, I think, on the front end is not just good policy. It's going to save money, and it's going to reduce those injuries and fatalities that you talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, anything else? Any other thoughts? Any other questions for the two bill sponsors on either bill, on HB 399 or HB 99? I'm sorry, I'm adding numbers here, combining the bill numbers: 99, which is the annexation bill, and 394 on sidewalks. Nope. Ms. Barron, I guess we don't have any questions for you, any legal or policy or other questions. Do you, Jen, have, or Delegate Terrazza, I'm sorry, anybody for our council? Thank you for helping us, to prioritize and, the bills, and we do have more coming at us. I'm seeing those popping up, and so we will plan to meet again the same time next week, and we'll keep you apprised of the agenda, obviously, and I'm thinking we will hopefully be in a position to vote out a bill next week. So thank you for your time and your thoughtfulness and the input. And do I need a motion for adjournment, Ms. Barron?
Yes.
Can I have a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
Thank you. In a second.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned. Take care. Have a good evening.